I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel is enraged over a shocking new Polish Holocaust law. A family in Israel is reunited after decades. And get ready, because it looks like an Israeli art collective is behind the music video of one of the biggest bands in the world. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have just met face-to-face at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Now, this is one of the world's biggest gatherings of international leaders in business and industry. But the money talk was overshadowed a bit by the more pressing topic of Middle East peace. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on the story. So, Aaron, what were some of the highlights?
Well, I think the major highlight that's been covered on, practically across the world is that President Donald Trump essentially reneged on his December 6th decision to allow Israel and the Palestinians to split Jerusalem how they see fit in whatever future negotiations there may be. Whereas over this past weekend in Davos, he said emphatically it's off the table.
Okay, so I mean, this is clearly going to affect Middle East peace, but in what way do you think?
It's hard to tell. It's a pretty controversial statement, not only because it goes against what he himself said earlier, but also because even today we're not sure whether or not to take him at his word or other people within his administration. Because while he's in Davos saying Jerusalem is off the table, you have United States Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, at the UN saying that the United States, quote, remains fully prepared and eager to pursue peace. We have done nothing to prejudge the final borders of Jerusalem, and we've done nothing to alter the status of the holy sites. And we remain committed to the possibility of potential for two states if agreed to by all parties. So it's hard to even kind of know where to put your attention.
All right, well, let's check out your report.
The American president took the opportunity to double down on last year's controversial Jerusalem decision, saying that Jerusalem was officially off the table in future peace talks with the Palestinians.
When they disrespected us a week ago by not allowing our great vice president to see them, and we give them hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and support, tremendous numbers that nobody understands. That money is on the table, and that money is not going to them unless they sit down and negotiate peace. Because I can tell you that Israel does want to make peace, and they're going to have to want to make peace too, or we're going to have nothing to do with it any longer.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has hailed this administration as a new era in American-Israeli relations, but Palestinians, however, say Trump's Jerusalem decision, along with his threats to continue slashing all financial aid to the Palestinians, is not only dangerous, but also a death strike to the decades-long peace process altogether.
The insistence of President Trump saying that Jerusalem is off the negotiating table translates into that peace is off the negotiating table. What Palestinians and Israelis need, they need a meaningful peace process that would lead to the two-state solution, the state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, to live side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel on the 1967 lines. This is what's needed, and everything else is throwing Palestinian and Israelis deeper and deeper into the cycle of violence and counter-violence.
But even Europe's top rabbi has joined the international chorus now of those condemning Trump for cutting nearly half of its aid to the Palestinians. Like so many others, he warns that economic pressure, especially on a group classified as refugees, will possibly turn desperate times into desperate measures.
In an article published in Lebanese media this morning, IDF spokesman General Ronen Manelis essentially begged the Lebanese people to open their eyes and fight back against Iran's growing hostile encroachment into Lebanese territory. Returning to the studio to help discuss it further is the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Security Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. All right, now, Dr. Sherman, how do you respond to the allegation that Lebanon is now an Iranian franchise?
Well, it's certainly becoming more and more, it's developing into an Iranian franchise. The situation developing in Lebanon is extremely grave for Israel, and I think we are reaping the bitter fruits of appeasement policy from two people, from Olmert, who in 2006 really badly managed the Second Lebanese War and left the Hezbollah as a viable fighting force instead of completely defeating it. And of course, the Obama policy, which basically enriched the Iranian regime economically, empowered it militarily, and entrenched it politically, making the prospect of any future regime far more amenable to peace, more and more remote.
The question is, are the Lebanese allowing this, or is there essentially little to nothing that they can do about it?
I'd be very doubtful if they could do anything without engaging in massive violence against the Hezbollah. I don't think the Hezbollah will let the Lebanese oppose them meekly, and I think they'll have strong Iranian backing to help them. But I think in the end there's going to be huge violence. I think the IDF spokesman was quite right, because Israel is going to have very little option but to employ massive violence, because the kind of arsenal.
What is the time frame on that when you say that? In the end?
You know, people say that the Second Lebanese War deterred the Hezbollah. I don't think so, because a deterred party doesn't multiply its arsenal by a factor of 10. And what the war did, it forced them to regroup, rearm, and redeploy. And they'll probably choose their own time of hostilities. And I think the lucky thing was with us that during the 2014 war with Hamas, Hezbollah was preoccupied in the Syrian civil war and couldn't coordinate military moves with Hamas. But down the line in the future, that could easily be, and that would result in a situation which would probably completely overwhelm Israel's anti-missile defense and require massive aggression.
All right, Dr. Sherman, thank you for coming in and shedding some light on this issue.
Thank you.
All right, this weekend, the world united in sorrow to commemorate International Holocaust Memorial Day. Unfortunately, this solemn occasion was marred with a shocking and controversial new law, passed in Poland no less, which makes it illegal to refer to Nazi camps in Poland used to murder Jews as, quote, Polish death camps. That includes the infamous Auschwitz concentration camp. For many, the horrific irony was only made worse by the fact that the bill's passage coincided with the Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony, conducted at Auschwitz the very next day. Israeli leaders across the aisle have slammed this bill as dangerous, accusing it of potentially rewriting one of history's darkest chapters. Poland's prime minister, however, is fiercely defending the law. He argues that although the Nazis did indeed commit evil crimes in places like Auschwitz, neither the name Auschwitz nor its infamous banner Arbeit macht frei is Polish. That's why the new law says calling Nazi-run camps Polish death camps slanders Poland by likening them to Nazi war criminals. While organizations like Israel's Yad Vashem Holocaust Center do recognize that the wording itself may be a historical misrepresentation, they say the law itself is a serious distortion of how the Nazis were able to carry out their gruesome crimes, which included both active passive assistance from the Polish population. Even after getting a fierce scolding from Israel's foreign ministry, Poland does not seem to be backing down from this new law. If found guilty, violators can be imprisoned for up to 3 years. Joining us now is Yosef Komem, a Holocaust survivor who has written a beautiful autobiography about his experience called Courage and Grace. Yosef, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about your story.
Well, Courage and Grace is a saga of my nuclear and extended family's unbelievable struggle for survival in Poland occupied by the Nazis during the entire Holocaust period, 1939 to 45, half and 5 years. My father, Moshe, a deaf person, and my hearing mother, Tesha, were the decision makers in this murderous chaos of uncertainty. My brother Yitzhak and I, both of us aged 3.5 up to 10 years during the Nazi oppression, cooperated and complied in full. It is a story of escape from 2 ghettos where actions were conducted, concealing under a Catholic identity in a small town in Galicia, also during the Polish uprising of Warsaw, of being hidden by 3 Polish families who endangered their lives to save us, 7 members of which were recognized as writers among the nations. Mother spent 5 months in the concentration camp Stutthof and escaped from the Death March. I wandered to and forth between 6 towns and cities, hundreds of kilometers apart. Our family was separated most of the time, but somehow managed to communicate. Each one of us was subject to blackmail by informers. Father, a skillful mechanic, managed to work under Aryan disguise, mostly in factories ruled by the Germans. Mother marketed pastries baked by our Catholic landlady. So we survived. Yes, 6 million Jews and many others were murdered.
Yes, I mean, this is a tragic yet hopeful story, Yosef, obviously. But, you know, as a survivor from Poland, what is your reaction to Poland's new law saying that it's illegal for concentration camps in the country, like Auschwitz, to be called Polish concentration camps and must only be referred to as German concentration camps?
I agree with this statement. It was a mishap that they were built there, but the concentration camps were only a part of the story. There was a question of the interaction between the Jews and Poles out of the camps.
Right, which is, I think, what is so very interesting, because you said yourself that you were protected by Polish people, but at the same time there was anti-Semitism in Poland.
Of course.
Right, so we can't forget that there was anti-Semitism either, obviously, but it's still, you know, obviously interesting that this law would be put into practice right now in Poland, and many people are upset by it.
Well, of course, there were many Poles who were making their living by
being involved in the German Holocaust.
by giving Jews to the Germans. And,
yeah.
And also, of course, there was anti-Semitism, and there was it's a big story.
Yeah.
Personally, we were subject to informers, and we had to pay ransom and to change places, and all this is described in the book.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Yosef. I think that for those people who are really interested in learning more about Yosef's story, you have to read his book. You can go to the link that's listed below, where you can find it on Amazon. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story, and never forget.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
Even more prominent Israelis are joining the protest against Israel's controversial plan to deport or jail nearly 40,000 asylum seekers from Africa that are currently living in Israel. This latest group includes dozens of former Israeli diplomats begging Prime Minister Netanyahu to halt the deportations before they begin in just 2 months. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is back here with the update.
Thanks, Natasha. Well, this latest group to join the fray on behalf of asylum seekers includes not only former Israeli diplomats, but also 2 former heads of the Foreign Ministry and a former member of the Knesset. And they're all echoing what previous pleas from Holocaust survivors, rabbis, and doctors have said, that the country has a moral duty, especially as a Jewish state, to protect these asylum seekers, and at the very minimum, not to deport them to possible, if not likely, danger.
Now, this topic is only getting more and more heated as we get closer to the government's April deadline to start the deportations. Police haven't said if this is connected to the protests themselves, but actually one of these asylum seekers, a young Eritrean man, was just stabbed in Petah Tikva.
Right, no, I saw that, and police are investigating that case right now. But you're right, both proponents of and opposition to the plan have really been ramping up in recent weeks. Police are now also investigating another incident at the Tel Aviv Office of Population, Immigration and Border Authority, where a bunch of severed doll heads doused in bloody red paint have been set up in apparent protest to the demonstration, to the deportations. There was a note left at the scene that read, "The blood is on your hands." The government says this kind of protest blows past all red lines, but this idea that the government is literally sending these asylum seekers to their deaths is exactly why so many people are so worked up right now, as you'll see right now in the rest of my report. The outrage against the government's controversial plan to deport nearly 40,000 African men, women, and children has been gaining steam in recent weeks. This latest group of former Israeli envoys joins dozens of Holocaust survivors, rabbis, doctors, and citizens, urging Israel to, quote, do the Jewish thing and stop the deportations. Though the Israeli government has branded this group, mostly Christians from Eritrea and Sudan, as illegal infiltrators, governments all over the world do recognize them almost unanimously as political refugees. Indeed, many entered Israel with stories of genocide, war, and indefinite service in a slave army in their home countries. But despite the growing international backlash against the plan, so far the government has not backed down. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu is calling some of the arguments a joke, namely that Rwanda is an unsafe country to deport to. The UN's refugee agency, however, disagrees. The agency points to countless cases of human trafficking, extortion, and disappearances that resulted from deportations to Rwanda, which include several thousand from Israel, as evidence of a death sentence. The Director General of Israel's Population and Immigration Authority claims only single African men of working age will be targeted when the plan begins in April, but critics point out that this would still force teenagers as young as 19, most of whom are currently finishing their studies in public Israeli high schools, to choose between deportation or going to jail forever.
All right, now from that corny transition, an incredible reunion between long-lost sisters has just shed some troubling new light on the alleged Yemenite children affair. DNA testing has begun to confirm what one woman has suspected nearly her entire life, that she may have been one of hundreds of Yemenite children that were kidnapped from their birth parents in the 1950s and then given away to an Ashkenazi family without consent. 67-year-old Varda Fox has suspected for decades that something was wrong with her adopted parents' story. Despite telling her that she'd been adopted legally from a Zionist orphanage, Fox suspected that she'd actually been one of the hundreds of Yemenite children that had mysteriously disappeared during hospital visits in the early years of the country. Indeed, countless family stories share disturbing similarities. Most say that during regular hospital visits, the doctor suddenly announced that their infant had inexplicably died, then gave them an address with their infant's alleged grave and told them the funeral had already been conducted. This is pretty much what Ofa Mazol, now 62, remembers her mother saying, along with years of her mother's tears over an alleged lost child that had been taken away from her. And now, decades later, DNA testing conducted by MyHeritage and organized by Knesset member Nurit Koren has reunited this long-lost family. The reunion was a heartbreaking one, with both sisters immediately breaking into tears. But now, as Mazol points out, they can finally have the relationship that they'd always dreamed of. The courts have recently ordered DNA testing of 17 alleged graves of Yemenite children, which means this reunion could merely be the first of even more to come. Over 3.2 million people worldwide are facing end-stage renal disease, a condition that takes place when the kidney stops working well enough for a person to survive. Typically, treatment involves either a kidney transplant or dialysis. And joining us now in the studio is Hezkia Tsuri, the CEO of Liberty, a company that is trying to make the process easier. Thank you so much for joining us. So you have a device right here on the table. Tell us about what it does.
So this device basically helps you do your dialysis at home or anywhere, anytime, and reduces the time that is required in order to do that from between 4 hours to 12 hours to only 20 minutes per session, which is about 1 hour and a half.
Now, this is unbelievable for anybody who has a loved one or a friend who is on dialysis. This is a game changer, obviously. So this is portable. You can take it anywhere that you want.
Yes, you can take it anywhere. And today, peritoneal dialysis involves doing the exchange in a sterile environment.
Right.
We found a way to do the sterilization inside the equipment. So the patient is no longer confined to home or to a sterile environment, and he can do his dialysis anywhere, anytime.
That's unbelievable. I mean, and I'd love to hear, obviously, how that process worked. I was going to ask you how you came up with this idea, but I think it's pretty clear when you understand what it takes to go through dialysis, like you said, 4 to 12 hours in the home or in the hospital. It's a lot of time wasted, and it's not easy. Now, is this product available yet?
No, we are now operating within the Trendlines incubator. The product is in will go into trials in the next few months and will be available within 18 to 20 months.
That's unbelievable. I mean, this is going to be changing so many different lives, and I really can't wait for it to come out. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us about this.
Thank you very much.
All right. Archaeologists are rewriting history practically every day here in the Holy Land with their amazing discoveries. But today they're rewriting prehistory. That's because the oldest ever human remains outside of Africa have just been discovered in northern Israel, which means humans may have left the cradle of life far, far earlier than we ever thought. This incredible discovery is a section of an ancient human jawbone, complete with several teeth, and it's in near impeccable condition. Scientists have dated it to sometime between 177 to 194,000 years ago, which means modern humans were here in the Holy Land at least 50,000 years earlier than experts previously thought. Anthropologists currently believe that modern Homo sapiens began immigrating or migrating out of Africa roughly 100,000 years ago, but this new find certainly throws an interesting curve into that theory. That's because the question of how humans got here still remains. An international team dug up this jawbone in a prehistoric dig in Israel's Mislia cave near Mount Carmel in the north. In fact, as we speak, scientists are exploring every last inch of this exciting find. So who knows how many answers it'll unlock or how many more have yet to be discovered. U2, one of the biggest bands of all time, has just commissioned Israel's most legendary street artist collective for a new one-of-a-kind music video. Based in Haifa, the Broken Fingers crew brings their psychedelic style and political spunk to the band's latest single, Get Out of Your Own Way, a song that U2 frontman Bono wrote as a letter to his daughters. Israelis are no stranger to Broken Fingers' insane colors and controversial symbols. The group started off in 2001 as a team of anonymous graffiti artists in Haifa, whose sexual and political artwork became a centerpiece of both Israeli debate and culture alike. You can still find their work tagged all over buildings throughout the country. Their symbols skyrocketed them to international fame, eventually catching the eye of U2's lead singer and performer Bono, who contracted Broken Fingers for U2's American Soul music video last year. That video quickly went viral, and it looks like the second collaboration for Get Out of Your Own Way is a smash hit too. Given free rein to do almost whatever they wanted this time, Broken Fingers tirelessly shot this as a stop-motion animation, filming in London, Bangkok, and right here in Israel. Bono himself is obviously a huge fan, confessing to newspapers that, quote, "We didn't give them much of a brief. We kind of, dare we say it, got out of their way." Rejoice, Eagles fans. For only the third time in the team's history, the Philadelphia Eagles will compete for Super Bowl glory against the New England Patriots in an epic David and Goliath showdown that is already destined for NFL history. But until the big game, Eagles fans everywhere are actually adopting an unofficial mascot for the team, a 99-year-old Jewish man born and raised in the city of brotherly love. Meet Philadelphia local and True Blood Eagles fan Phil Baser, or as he's better known, meet Philadelphia Phil. Born in 1918 to an incredibly poor Jewish family in Philly, Phil's childhood was plagued with grief after the death of both his mother, father, and sister at an early age. Phil grew up in a local Jewish orphanage before serving the United States in both World War II and the Korean War, and caught his first Eagles game around the same time the team was founded in 1933. He was 15 at the time, and now years later he's about to turn 100, and he's still the #1 fan. That's why Eagles fans all over the country, including expats right here in Israel, are celebrating this man's life on the eve of the biggest David and Goliath showdown Super Bowl in recent history. We haven't picked sides yet, but we know who takes the prize for the best mascot of the year. Amazing. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Some of us believe in it and some of us don't believe in it, but we've all thought about it at least once. Goral, which means destiny in Hebrew. For 99-year-old Philadelphia Phil, who's loved the Philadelphia Eagles since he was just a kid, it probably feels like Goral that he is now being hailed as the unofficial mascot for the team for this upcoming Super Bowl. But some may say that isn't truly Goral. Rather, it's just a sign that Phil was just destined to become the person he decided to be. That's some food for thought, right? Well, I personally would love to think that the things that are meant to happen will happen, but Goral or no destiny, I'm going to keep working as hard as I can for what I want. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight and tomorrow should both be partly cloudy and with a rise in temperatures. The low tonight will be about 50 or 10 degrees Celsius, and tomorrow you can expect the high to be around 62 or 17 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.39 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.